the Heinkel Kabine, a small car with a big history. This little vehicle came from a company that used to make airplanes, Heinkel Flugzeugwerke. I hope I pronounced it right. They created it as a cheap way for people to get around after World War II. After the war, many companies that made military stuff had to change what they did. Ernst Heinkel, who knew a lot about making planes, had to find something new to build. He used what he knew about planes to make this small car light and good at cutting through the air. At first, Heinkel made fancy scooters, but when people stopped buying them as much, he saw a chance to make tiny cars that were becoming popular. People in Europe after the war wanted cars that didn't cost much, used little gas, and could fit in small spaces. Heinkel got ideas from another small car called the Iso Isetta, but he wanted to make his car even better. He made the cabine lighter by using a special way of building the body. This made it about 100 kilograms lighter than other small cars like it. The cabine had a different kind of engine than most small cars. It used a 4-stroke engine instead of a 2-stroke. This made it run more smoothly and make less noise and smoke. Even though it was small, the cabine was made to be comfortable. It had a door that opened at the front, making it easy to get in and out. It also had a fabric roof that could open, which could be used to get out in an emergency. Heinkel made different types of the cabine. The first one was called Model 150, and it came out in March 1956. It had 3 wheels and an engine that was 174 cubic centimeters big. This engine could make 9.2 horsepower. In October 1956, they made 2 new types, Model 153 and Model 154. The Model 153 had 3 wheels and a bigger engine that was 198 cubic centimeters, which they later made 204 cubic centimeters. The Model 154 was the same, but had 4 wheels instead of 3. All the cabine models were made with strong steel bodies. They had a door that opened at the front, which made it easy for people to get in and out. They also had gears that the driver could change, which gave them more control over how the car moved. Heinkel started making the cabine in Germany, but as more people wanted it, they let companies in other countries make it too. One company in Ireland called Dundalk Engineering Company started making it in 1958 and called it Trojan. But they had problems making it well, so Heinkel took away their permission. Then, a company in the UK called Trojan Cars Limited started making it in 1960. In the UK, they called it the Trojan 200 and kept making it until 1965. People in the UK liked it because they didn't have to pay as much tax on cars with 3 wheels. The cabine was popular because it was small, didn't use much gas, and was good for driving in cities. It could drive about 25 miles using only 1 gallon of gas. The cabine became famous and was even in some movies. It was in a movie called I'm All Right, Jack in 1959 and another called Murder in Eden in 1961. This made more people know about it. The cabine showed how people were trying to make better, cheaper ways to get around after the war. It was small and looked different, which made people want to talk about it. Now, people who like old cars really want to find cabines. Some people fix them up, and they can be worth a lot of money. You can see them in car shows and museums.
The Messerschmitt KR175 is a really cool microcar. Messerschmitt, a German company that used to make airplanes, started making these little cars from 1953 to 1955. People called it the Kabinenroller, which means scooter with a cabin in German. After World War II, Germany was trying to rebuild everything. Messerschmitt couldn't make airplanes anymore because of new rules, so they had to find something else to make. A smart engineer named Fritz Fend came up with the idea to make small motor vehicles. He had already made something called the Fend Flitzer for disabled veterans, and that gave him the idea for the KR175. The KR175 was made to be a cheap and fuel-saving way for people to get around in Europe after the war. It was small and light, perfect for driving on narrow streets. At first, they tried making it with a 150 cubic centimeter engine, but the final version had a bigger 173 cubic centimeter engine. They started making the KR175 in February 1953 in a factory in Regensburg. This factory used to make airplanes during the war, but now it was making these little cars. At first, they had some problems and had to make a lot of changes to make the car work better. By the time they stopped making the KR175 in 1955, they had made about 15,000 of them. The KR175 did so well that they made a new version called the KR200. The KR175 looked really different from other cars. It had a clear, bubble-like top made of plastic that opened up and to the right. This gave the driver a great view and made the car look a bit like an airplane. Inside, the seats were one behind the other, like in a plane cockpit. This made the car narrow enough to fit easily on busy streets. The first KR175s had a windshield wiper you had to move by hand, but later they added an electric one. The front of the car was smooth, without spaces cut out for the wheels. This made it look sleek from front to back. The controls inside were simple and easy to use. You could get different types of KR175. Some didn't have the full bubble top and just had a windshield, but most people liked the ones with the full top because they kept you dry when it rained and looked more futuristic. The engine in the KR175 was behind the back seat. It was a 173 cubic centimeter engine made by Fichtel and Sachs. It only had one cylinder and made about 9 horsepower. That might not sound like much, but it was enough to make the light KR175 go pretty well. The engine was cooled by air, which made it simple and tough. At first, you had to start the engine with a rope, like a lawnmower. But in 1954, they added an electric starter as an option, and soon all KR175s had it. This made it much easier to start the car. The KR175 had 4 forward gears, but no reverse gear. If you needed to back up, you had to get out and push the car or turn it around by hand. Later models fixed this problem. Even though it didn't have a lot of power, the KR175 was great on fuel. It could go a long way without using much gas, which was really important when gas was expensive. The KR175 had handlebars instead of a steering wheel. This was because Messerschmitt used to make airplanes, and they were used to that kind of control. The handlebars made it easy to steer the car in tight spaces. The gear shift was on the right side, and you used it to change gears and work the clutch with one hand. The gas was controlled by twisting the left handlebar, like on a motorcycle. There was just one pedal for the brakes, which worked on all 3 wheels. In 1954, they changed the clutch from a lever to a pedal. This made it more like driving a normal car and easier for people who weren't used to motorcycle controls. Today, you can find fixed-up KR175s at old car auctions, where they often sell for a lot of money.
The Fula Mobile. This tiny vehicle was made in Germany from 1950 to 1969. Right after World War II, when people needed cheap ways to get around. The Fula Mobile started when a guy named Norbert Stevenson came up with the idea. A company called Elektromaschinenbau Fulda GmbH made it. They wanted to make a car that wouldn't cost much and would be good on gas. The first one, called the N1, came out in 1950. It had 3 wheels, which was different from most cars. At first, they made the body out of wood and fabric because materials were hard to find and they needed to keep costs down. Later on, they switched to aluminum, which looked better and lasted longer. People started calling it the Silver Flea because it was small and shiny. The first engines they used were made by Baker and Poling, but these had a lot of problems. They were noisy and kept breaking down, so the company changed to engines made by Fichtel and Sachs, which worked much better. These new engines were 360 cubic centimeters in size. The Fula Mobile looked pretty unique. It had 3 wheels, with one at the back that did all the work. This made it easy to drive in cities. The body had straight edges and was made of hammered aluminum. Some people paid extra to have their cars painted different colors. One weird thing about the car was where they put the windshield wipers. They were at the bottom of the windshield, which wasn't normal for cars back then. It also had a small opening behind each door that looked like a letterbox. The inside was pretty basic, with simple seats and not much else. They kept it this way to make sure the car stayed cheap. But making the Fula Mobile wasn't easy. From June 1951 to September 1952, they made at least 346 of them. Some people said making these cars was more like a hobby than a real business. The early ones had a lot of problems, especially with the engines. That's why they had to switch to the Fichtel and Sachs engines. Like Heinkel Kabine, the Fula Mobile also wasn't just made in Germany. Other countries like the UK, Sweden, Greece, India, and Argentina also made them. This helped the Fula Mobile become one of the longest-made small cars, with about 3,000 made over almost 20 years. Making the car in different countries meant they had to change some things to fit local rules. Over time, they made different versions of the Fula Mobile. The N2 was stronger and had a better engine. The S1 looked smoother and drove better. The S7, one of the last ones they made, had a 198 cubic centimeter Sachs engine and looked more like a teardrop. It was also more comfortable inside. The Fula Mobile did some cool things. They made a version for disabled drivers, which was shown at a big event in Munich in 1952. A disabled war veteran named Werner Ritterbusch even drove his Fula Mobile 9,000 kilometers from Kassel to Lapland and back. This showed how tough the car was. Another cool thing happened when Georg Kremel, who used to race cars, drove a Fula Mobile on some of the steepest roads in Europe. He went over mountain passes like Großglockner and Katschberg Ohe. This proved that even though the car was small, it could handle tough roads.
The Peele P50. This little vehicle was made from 1962 to 1965 by the Peele Engineering Company on the Isle of Man. It's so small it holds the Guinness World Record for being the smallest production car ever made. How small? Just 54 inches long and 39 inches wide. The P50's design is super simple but clever. It's smaller than some washing machines, but it's still a real car you can drive. It has one door on the left side, which makes it easy to get in and out, even in tight spots. There's only one headlight and one windshield wiper, but that's all it needs for driving around town. Inside, it's pretty basic. The seat is just fabric stretched over a metal frame to keep the car light. The dashboard only has the most important controls. The steering wheel is small, and the shifter and pedals are simple and easy to use. And here's a funny thing about the original P50. It doesn't have a reverse gear. Instead, it has a handle on the back so you can pick it up and turn it around if you need to. This works because the whole car only weighs about 130 pounds. The P50's engine is tiny too. It's a 49cc DKW engine that makes about 4.2 horsepower. That's not much, but it's enough to get the car up to 37 miles per hour, which is fine for city driving. The best part? It can go about 100 miles on a single gallon of gas. Only about 47 P50s were made back then, which makes them really rare now. Each one was built by hand, showing how much care went into making them. They cost 199 pounds when they were new, which was a good deal for a car, even a tiny one. People loved the P50 because it was perfect for busy cities with narrow streets and not much parking. It was easy to drive and park, and it didn't use much gas. It became a symbol of new ideas in the 1960s. Over time, the P50 has become famous. It's been on TV shows and in magazines. One of its most famous moments was when Jeremy Clarkson drove one through the BBC TV building on the show Top Gear. In 2010, Peele Engineering Limited decided to start making P50s again. The new ones look like the old ones, but they have some modern updates. You can get them with regular engines or electric motors. They can go up to 28 miles per hour, which is still good for city driving. Unlike the old ones, the new P50s can go in reverse. These new P50s are made by hand in Sutton-in-Ashfield, England. People like them because they mix old-fashioned charm with new technology. The electric ones are especially popular in places with strict rules about car pollution, like the United States. The idea to make P50s again came from two guys named Gary Hillman and Faisal Khan. They went on a TV show called Dragon's Den and got 80,000 pounds to start making the cars again. The P50 has had a big impact on car culture. Car fans and collectors love it because it's so unique, After it was on Top Gear, even more people became interested in it. That episode is one of the most watched in the show's history. The original P50s from the 1960s are worth a lot of money now. Some have sold for over $120,000 at auctions. That's a lot more than the 199 pounds they cost when they were new. This shows how much people value these rare little cars. The P50 has inspired people to make their own versions, and it's often shown at car shows. People all over the world love its unusual design and quirky features. Today, if you want a new P50, you can order one from Peele Engineering Limited. They cost about 14,000 pounds, which is a lot more than the original price, but people are willing to pay it to own such a special car. In different countries, the P50 is treated differently by the law. In the UK, it's always been legal to drive on roads. It's called a three-wheeler. In the United States, it's also allowed on roads, but some states call it a motorcycle or moped because it's so small.